Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to brew a simple beer kit. Anybody can do this. Anybody can make delicious homebrew at home. It's very easy and it comes in a box about this big and you can make 5 gallons of delicious, great beer that will impress anybody. Today we're brewing a Northern German alt beer and this is a very simple kit. It comes with dried malt extract, Pilsen Light. They call it DME, stands for dried malt extract. It comes with a can of liquid malt extract. They call it LME, liquid malt extract. It comes with some steeping grains and a little bag to steep them in, just like making tea. And it comes with 2 1-ounce bags of German hops. It also comes with an instruction sheet. It's very simple. So what I like to do is I like to lay out my ingredients before I get started. It's time to brew some beer. Okay, the next thing you're going to need is some sort of a brewing kettle. Here we're going to use a turkey fryer. They work great. It'll hold more than 5 gallons. It's perfect. And then you're going to need 5 gallons of good quality water. A good rule of thumb if you're starting out in home brewing is if you'll drink the water, it's probably good enough for home brewing. However, I go to the local grocery store and they have one of those kiosk machines and I get my water from there. It's 29 cents a gallon, so it's very cheap. And it's very good water. It doesn't have a high mineral content and it doesn't have any chemicals in it. It's reverse osmosis. So you're going to want to fill your turkey fryer. All right, so we've got 5 gallons of water in our turkey fryer, and we're going to throw that on the stove. All right, we're going to throw our lid on and turn our stove on high. Now, some of you might not have this powerful of a stove, and you might need to use a propane burner outside. Some beer extract kits come with steeping grains, and some don't. Some kits come with a muslin bag to steep your grains in, and some don't. It just depends. Also, some come with a bag for your hops, which this kit did not, but I actually have saved some old bags that I use for my hops. So what I like to do while the water's heating up is I like to go ahead and get my grains ready. So our water's heating up to 155 degrees. And that temperature kind of varies from kit to kit. Some kits say steep your grains at 160. Some say slowly bring it up to 170. What I like to do is put the muslin bag over the Ziploc bag so I don't make a mess, and then just do it over a skillet in the sink. And then just dump them in, like so. Remove the Ziploc bag. You don't have a mess that way. And you have your bags, or your grains in your steeping bag ready to go. So when the water gets to 155, we'll put that in. This particular beer has 2 hop additions. It has 1 ounce of hops that you put in at the very beginning of the boil, and then it has another ounce of the same hops that you put in at the halfway point at 30 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and this kit did not come with bags for the hops. A lot of people add the hops straight into the boil kettle. I don't like doing that though. I like to keep, because they break down and it creates a sludge at the bottom of your kettle. And you end up wasting some beer. Now you don't get quite as much hop utilization because they're all stuck together in a ball in this bag. But I personally don't like super hoppy beers anyway, so I don't mind doing this because I don't end up sacrificing the hop sludge that would have ended up being beer. I mean, it might only amount to half a glass, but hey, a half a glass is a half a glass. So one of these we're going to put in right at the beginning of the boil, and the other one we're going to put in at 30 minutes in. So here we have our bucket that we're going to use for fermentation. I'm going to get it cleaned out. It had sanitizer in it, but I did notice that it still had like some specks of dirt or something in it. I'm just going to do hot water and I like to use this little snake thing for and keep my fermentation all cleaned out. Also, everything with the good grains ready to go. I'll need to sanitize it. I'm going to do that and switch around. Try to get some of that dirt. I have this bucket for a few weeks. It's been sitting, so sometimes fish up. And spray over the those on these oxygen. I got force related. I'll use that as and stick around just clean it up. So make sure it's free water and breathe. And let's go for right here. All right. So our water is a little bit over 155 degrees right now. So I went ahead and killed the heat, and it'll kind of slowly bounce back to 155. But I'm going to go ahead and remove the lid and put our steeping grains in, just like so. And I just like to tie them off to the handle. Some people tie them in a knot and they sink it to the bottom and retrieve it with the spoon later. Hey, it's however you want to do it. It's just like making tea. So now I can show you the color from the grains. Instantly goes throughout. But anyway, so we got our steeping grains in, and I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. At 20 minutes, we'll remove the steeping grains, and then we'll go ahead and heat it up to a boiling. You don't want to agitate the bag too much or squeeze the bag, because you can give it an astringent flavor that's not very good. You just kind of want the water to soak through the grains. So that's about all the fluffing I'm going to do. I'm just going to let it go for 20 minutes. I'm just going to put the lid back on it, and I'm just going to let it go for 20 minutes. And I'm going to try to maintain it at about 155 degrees. So I got my bucket rinsed out real good, and now we're going to go ahead and mix up a batch of sanitizer. This is called Star San. This is a non-rinse sanitizer. That's what makes it so great. It only needs 30 seconds to a minute of contact time, and you don't have to rinse it. You just dump it out and you're clean. And you can use it multiple times. As long as it has a certain pH level, it is sanitary. So anyway, it's got this little measuring thing. We're going to go ahead and make up 5 gallons. You don't have to make up that much. But since I do so much brewing, it's easier to make it in 5-gallon quantities. My bucket here has a measuring thing on the side that shows 5 gallons. For 5 gallons, you need 1 ounce of Star Sans. So we're going to fill this little thing on the top here just by squeezing it. You got to squeeze it kind of hard, but there we have 1 ounce of Star San ready to go. We pour it in our bucket. And then all you got to do is add water. So again, I'll use my trusty, dusty hose here, snake hose, and I'll go ahead and fill this bucket up to this 5-gallon notch here on the side. Okay, so here we have our bucket with our newly made sanitizer in it, and over here we have a clean bucket. So when we go to put our beer in this bucket, we'll just put the sanitizer in that bucket. This will be really handy because anything that needs to be sanitized that's going to come into contact with the beer after the boil, we can put in this bucket to soak, and it'll be good and clean. Another thing I like to do is I like to wedge the lid in the sanitizer so it's completely submerged. Also, I like to put the airlock in there too. So I like to go ahead and throw that in. Alright, so our buzzer just went off. It's been 20 minutes and we've maintained right at 160. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the lid. And I'm going to go ahead and untie this grain bag from the handle, and I'm going to give it a couple good up and downs to get all that extra. And then I'm just going to hold it up and let her drain. And then I just like to take my trusty dusty skillet and put her in there. Now you can take these spent grains out and you can throw them out for the birds and for the deer or whatever. You can also make bread with them. There's a lot of different things you can do with those. So we got our heat back on. I'm going to put our lid on and we're going to go ahead and bring this up to a boil. So it came up to a boil, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the lid. Get that out of the way. I actually took it and moved it off of the burner so that because this is an electric stove, so it'll keep going even though you shut it off. We're going to go ahead and take out the thermometer because we don't need that now. And I got me a nice long stir spoon there. I'm going to take my dry malt extract and cut it open. And I'm going to slowly stir that in. We're going to do it slowly because we don't want to just dump it all in and just get one big clod. That would not be good. And we want it to kind of dissolve in here as we do it. The reason we take it off the burner is because we don't want any of this to scorch to the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and while this is dissolving in, I'm actually going to turn my exhaust fan on. It's a little loud, but that'll help get some of the steam out of my house, because when you're boiling 5 gallons of something on the stove at the time, especially when you live in a house like mine with 7-foot ceilings, needless to say, it tends to increase the moisture quite a bit in the house. Okay, so I got most of it out of the bag. I'm just going to kind of do that and call it good. Alright, so I'm going to stir that in really good. And it looks really good. I'll bring the camera up here so that you can really see. Nice and foamy, frothy. It looks really nice. Okay, so that was the dry malt extract. Now we're going to go ahead and add the liquid malt extract. Same deal, just pour it in and stir. This is like a syrup. And it's really good, actually. You could eat this stuff on toast. It is so good. What this is this is cooked down wort, basically. Wort is unfermented beer. And this is barley that's been mashed. And they just cooked it and cooked it and cooked it until it was down into like a syrup. Basically like making maple syrup. It takes a while to get all that liquid out. It does take some time. You can take your spoon and kind of dig some out. Some people keep a kettle of hot water nearby and they rinse it out with that. But I just do a little trick. Some people might frown on this, but I dip her right in there and slosh it around inside the container, and that really helps get some of that unused off the sidewall. You might as well get all the sugar you can, because that's going to be your flavor and your alcohol and all your goodie. But you don't want to melt your container, so you want to be careful doing this. The container is just plastic. It's not made for 200+ degree liquid. But that's probably good enough. Most of the goodie out of it. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and get my, I'm going to get some good pot holders. I'll go ahead and get my pot holders, and I'll go ahead and slide this back over the heat. And I'll go ahead and turn my heat on. Back on high. And now we want to watch this like a hawk, because this will want to boil real bad. I'll show you. It can foam up pretty easily. So we do want to watch it really close. We're starting to get a boil now. This is what you call a hot break. So this is when your rolling boil first starts to show its face. And it starts to, usually starts on one corner of the boil kettle. And it usually kind of works its way over, and it kind of pushes the foam over as it goes. But it can foam up. So we look for that hot break. Let's see now how the foam is covering the whole thing. I'm going to have to kill the heat. See, it very easily can boil over. And let me tell you, when it boils over, it is a royal mess. But we got lucky, and we've got a hop break going on now. And we survived without a boil over so far. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat back on. This time I'm going to turn it medium high. I'd say we are successfully into our boil. So now we're going to add our first addition of hops. Throw them right in and tie them off to the handle just like I did the grain bag. Okay, so now our hops are in, so our boil is officially going. So I'm going to set my timer for 1 hour. Actually, I'm going to set it for 45 minutes. No, I'm going to set it for a half hour, my bad, because we have another hop addition at 30 minutes. So timer's going for 30 minutes. We got our hops in. We got a nice rolling boil. You want to keep a nice rolling boil. You don't want to tame it down too much. And I'm just going to fluff these a little bit, and we're good to go for about a half hour. Alright, so our half hour timer went off. So it's time to add our second hop addition. So I'll remove the lid, and we'll tie this hop addition off to this handle. It's that simple. Okay, I've got the second hop addition tied to this handle. Kind of give it a fluff, and it's good to go. Alright, we're going to go ahead and set our timer now. We've got a half hour left in the boil, but I'm actually going to set it for 15 minutes. And that's because we're going to put our Wort Chiller in when it goes off at 15 minutes. And I'll explain that here in a second. So we're going to put our lid back on. Now, one thing you'll notice, I'm not putting the lid all the way on. You never want to brew with the lid all the way on. There are certain compounds that need to escape the brewing kettle, otherwise you'll get kind of a corn type flavor and it's not desirable. So that's why we leave a space. I put the lid on a little bit to kind of help contain some of the heat in and save energy, but I definitely want that steam to get out. This is a Wort Chiller. I made this one myself out of some copper tubing that I got from the hardware store, and wash machine hose, and I put a fitting on it. So you can tie it, you can hook it up to a garden hose or a garden hose adapter on your sink. And then it just has simply a drain hose that's about 6 feet long that just drains out. The purpose of this is to submerge it into the boil kettle, and when the beer is done brewing, we'll actually run cold water through it and we'll drop the temperature very fast in the beer. So the next thing I'm going to do is, this is clean. I always clean it after every brew day, but I still want to go through it and just make sure that it's good and clean. So take my trusty dusty hose again, just right off, and I might just run over it with the rag. I think it's a good thing. I know I cleaned it really well last time, so we're good to go. Just gonna hose it down. Okay, so now when that alarm goes off, we're going to go ahead and put that in the kettle, and what that'll do is that'll sanitize that. So it'll boil for 15 minutes with the Wort Chiller in the kettle, and that'll sanitize it good. Okay, there's some other things we can do during this time we're waiting. I want to sanitize my scissors, so I'm going to throw them in the bucket of sanitizer. I want to sanitize a Pyrex glass or a bowl or something to put my yeast in, so in that goes. And I'm going to go ahead and sanitize my thermometer. Okay, so my timer went off. As you can see, I'm inserting the Wort Chiller. One of the things you want to do is make sure that you compress it down enough to where that top ring is below the liquid level. And we're going to go ahead and reset our timer for 15 more minutes. And then in 15 minutes will be what we call flame out. And the purpose for putting this in 15 minutes ahead of time is so that it gets sanitized. One of the things you want to get yourself is one of these squirt bottles and put some of the Star San in it. It'll come in really handy for sanitizing certain things. Another thing I've done is I've threw a little pan in here And I've also threw in my sanitizing spoon and made sure that I got the handle completely covered. Or sanitizing stirring spoon. We'll need that to stir the wort around the wort chiller here pretty soon. And the pan we'll use to boil a small amount of water to make sure it's sanitized so that we can hydrate our yeast. Alright, we are done with our boil. We are what you now call flame out. I'm going to go ahead and remove the lid. And I'm going to go ahead and untie our hot bags. I'm going to shut off the heat. And I'll go ahead and untie and remove the hot bags. And then we can begin to start the process of chilling our wort. I might have to do this off camera because it requires a little bit of time. But I went ahead and killed the heat. I'm going to remove the hops and we're going to chill our wort. Okay, so we have our wort chiller hooked up. I have cold water running through it. And I've got my sanitized thermometer and my sanitized spoon back in the wort. And I'm just going to periodically stir this in order to circulate the hot wort around the coils of the wort chiller to speed up the cooling process. You can almost watch it drop when I do that. It was over 200 and it just drops like a rock. You can see it getting down to 180 and so on and so forth. It only takes about 10 to 15 minutes to cool this down to about 70 degrees, which we're not even going to go that far with it today. Actually, I might go close to 70 because this is a cooler fermenting beer since it's an alt beer. So anyway, while that's going, we're going to leave that alone for a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and get some other stuff going. So I took that little pan that I sanitized and I put a very small amount of water in it. And I'm going to go ahead and boil this. And I'm going to boil it for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then I'll know it's sanitized. And this is what we're going to put our yeast in to rehydrate it. This is the yeast we're using, Safe Ale US-05 dry yeast. I'm going to dip this in my sanitizing solution so the outside of this package doesn't have any contaminants on it. I'm also going to throw this household whisk in. Alright, now we're back and we're at 130 degrees and counting down. This is now the danger zone. Anything below 160 degrees is susceptible for bacterial infection. So we want to be very, very clean from this point on. We need to be sterile from this point on. This thing here is called a thief. It's so that we can take a sample because we're going to get a hydrometer reading. So what I'm going to do is put this down in my sanitizer and make sure that it gets completely covered in sanitizer. I'm going to go ahead and make a cold water bath in the sink. Nice cold water. Not very deep. Just deep enough so that the pan that's on the stove over there can set in it and cool down faster. Because yeast can't survive at boiling, obviously, because yeast are microorganisms. So we want to get that water down to about 80 degrees. Okay, so our water here has been boiling for long enough. So I'm going to go ahead and kill that. And I'm going to take it over to this cool water bath that I made. And set her in there. Got a little too much water in there. It's kind of wanting to float, so I'll probably let a little out. Okay, so we're below 80 degrees now on our wort. So I'm going to go ahead and kill the cold water going through the wort chiller. And we'll be ready to take a reading for our hydrometer. Okay, so I'm going to dig out my my Pyrex cup here, and I'm going to go ahead and take this water out of the water bath. It is cooled down to about 80 degrees. I just used my thermometer that was in my wort. That worked perfectly fine. Okay, now I'm going to get my sanitized scissors out of here. They're somewhere in here. There they are. So I have my sanitized scissors, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut the top of the yeast packet off. And I'm just going to pour it straight in on the top, trying not to get it on the sides of the glass. I'm not going to stir it yet. I'm actually going to just let it sit on top of the warm water for about 15 minutes. I'll go ahead and set my timer for 15. Now it's time to take a hydrometer reading. And that's where our thief from earlier comes in. That we got, it's been soaking in the sanitizer for quite a while now. So I'm going to go ahead and let the excess sanitizer out of it. This thing works pretty good. I've got a hydrometer here. We should be somewhere above 1.050 on the hydrometer. I think 1.051 is what the ingredient sheet says. So I'll go ahead and put that in here. It's pretty slick how this thing works. Really like it. Okay, now we'll set this on a level surface and let some of the bubbles go out. Okay, so I removed the lid from the sanitizer. Set that aside. And I'm going to go ahead, and since this is the bucket we're going to use to ferment, I'm going to go ahead and pour this into my other clean bucket. That way this bucket will be ready when the time comes. I made sure I got it splashed all up against the sides and everything so that we know we're going to be sanitized. Now what we'll do is we'll aerate our wort. This is kind of tricky. You're going to want to pick it up and pour it between the two. And sometimes, just like there, I spill a little on the floor. I usually like to do it 3 or 4 times. There's a lot of different ways of aerating. They make things you can attach to a drill that you stick down in it that spin. They create all kinds of bubbles and introduce oxygen. They also make hoses you can stick into it with air pumps that actually pump oxygen into it. But this way works as good as any. Now while we're waiting, I'm going to go ahead and put my lid on just to keep it safe. Not going to put it on tight. Okay, so our bubbles have settled and our hydrometer has a reading here. I don't know if I can get it on the camera or not, but it's got a reading of about 1.061. It's just over 1060. We call that 1060. So I'm going to go ahead and call this 1.061, which is good. That's about 6% ABV. Now when you're done with the hydrometer sample, it's technically not sanitary, so there's only one thing you can do with it. Oh yeah, this is going to be a good beer. I can taste the caramelization of the syrupy wort. Yeah, this is going to be a very good beer. Okay, so you want to get your whisk out of your sanitizing solution. My timer just went off, so it's been 15 minutes since I put the yeast in on top of this. So with my sanitized whisk, I'm going to incorporate this into the water until it's a milky texture. And then I'm going to let it set 2 or 3 minutes. Alright, we are getting dangerously close to being done here. We're going to go ahead and pop the lid off of our fermenter. This is our wort. Looking good and foamy and aerated. Now we're going to take our yeast that has been sitting now for 2 or 3 minutes since I stirred it, and we're going to pour it into our wort. You can no longer call this wort now that live yeast has been introduced to it. This will forever be known as beer until it gets digested by the human body and turned into pee. Now all we got to do, snap on our lid, and dig out our airlock from the sanitizing bucket. Pop it on. Now, tomorrow morning when I get up, this bubbler will be bubbling like crazy as the CO2 escapes and fermentation begins. Now, I like to take down some notes at this point. It is a little high on the original gravity. 1051 is what the recipe calls for, about a 5.1 ABV. But there's a couple reasons that it's higher. I didn't add any extra water to the boil. I started with 5 gallons. So we probably ended up with slightly less than 5 gallons, which makes it more concentrated, which is going to give you a higher original gravity. Another thing I did, and I didn't do this on camera, I rinsed out a jar of honey that I had, and I put that in it. So the sweetness from the honey, the sugars in the honey, are also fermentable, so that added to the original gravity. So we have a OG of 1061, and today's date is, help me out, what is today's date? 1/14/19. It is a Monday. I like to put that down because it helps when it comes time to rack it. I'm also going to note that I added rinsed out jar of honey. All right, so you may think we're done at this point, but we're not. We have a ton of cleaning to do. We have to clean our boiling kettle. I've got all those dishes over there to clean. I need to clean the lid and put it on my other bucket with my sanitizer there. So it's a process, and you need to allow yourself about 5 hours. Well, I hope you enjoyed this simple home brewing video. I hope you found it very informative. Stay tuned for my next video in this series about racking your home brew. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Ooh.